Welcome to the January Nardis Parasite Forecast webinar. I'm Mike Taylor, a veterinary surgeon and European specialist in parasitology, and this month we will be discussing parasite control and planning ahead for the forthcoming grazing season, identifying the risk of liver fluke, chronic fluke disease in sheep and cattle, and lice in sheep and cattle. The Nardis Parasite Forecast is published monthly and based on detailed Met Office data. It is sponsored by Merrill Animal Health, supported by QMS or Quality Meat Scotland. There is a more detailed written parasite forecast available on this website, and we would like to thank Phil Scott for many of the images that appear in this webinar. The weather in November was changeable, with some unseasonably high temperatures at times, but becoming colder in the last week with widespread frosts and snow in some parts. The UK mean temperature was 5.8 degrees centigrade, with mean maximum temperatures slightly below average in many parts of England and 1 degree centigrade below average over much of Scotland. Rainfall was below average overall, being generally drier than normal in the south of England, central and southern Scotland and south east Wales, but wet in northern Scotland and northwest Lancashire. The cold spell at the end of November will not reduce levels of pasture worm larvae, and if milder conditions return, there can be a continued risk of worm infection in store lambs and replacements. Due to the wet summer and autumn in 2017, there is a high risk of fluke infection in parts of the country. This month is a good time to start reviewing parasite control plans for the forthcoming grazing season. Plan to provide safe grazing for ewes and lambs or for autumn-born calves at turnout, and decide how to use in a strategic manner to reduce the reliance on wormers for the control of internal parasites. For sheep, safe grazing includes last year's pastures grazed by cattle, or for cattle, pastures previously grazed by sheep, reseeded pastures, or from midsummer onwards, silage or hay aftermaths. Farmers are encouraged to make use of the new parasite control planners available through veterinary practices participating in the Nardis Parasite Control Initiative. As a result of the above average rainfall that fell during last year's summer and autumn in many parts of GB, the Nardis fluke forecast predicted a high risk of fluke infection in north, western and central Scotland, West Wales and Cornwall, with medium risk in eastern Scotland and parts of north and southwest England. Most of central and eastern regions of England were forecast to be at a low risk. More localised fluke risks and information on control options will be made available through veterinary practices participating in the new Nardis Parasite Control Initiative. For those in areas of the country with a fluke warning, it helps to identify high-risk fluke areas on the farm and consider if grazing these pastures can be avoided. Practical steps include fencing off wet areas, attending to leaking troughs and pipes, installing drainage, or even consider housing stock during parts of the winter when conditions are bad. For animals going to slaughter, ask for abattoir feedback on any liver rejections, which provides a warning that there may be a fluke problem on the farm. Ideally, flocks or herds should be monitored for the presence of fluke infection before using a flukicide. So investigate deaths or losses by post-mortem examination as and when possible, or screen regularly by fecal egg count monitoring for the presence of the characteristic eggs. Chronic liver disease in sheep due to the presence of adult fluke in the bile ducts peaks in late winter and early spring. Infected sheep may show progressive loss of condition, weakness and emaciation, with a lowered appetite and the development of anemia characterized by pale mucous membranes. Some animals may also show submandibular edema or bottle jaw. Farms in high fluke risk areas, particularly those with a history of liver fluke problems, should seek advice regarding fluke control. Alternatives to triclobendazole can be used at this time onwards, particularly if triclobendazole resistance has been either confirmed or is suspected on farm. Products containing chloranthyl or nitroxanil are active on late immature stages from about 6 to 7 weeks old and also against adult fluke. Products containing albendazole or oxychlorosinide are effective from about 3 months after the sheep were infected and can therefore be used when treatment is recommended to remove adult flukes only. Farms in high fluke risk areas, particularly those with a history of liver fluke problems, should seek advice regarding fluke control. Alternatives to triclobendazole can be used at this time onwards, particularly if triclobendazole resistance has been either confirmed or is suspected on farm. Products containing chloranthyl or nitroxanil are active on late immature stages from about 6 to 7 weeks old and also against adult fluke. Products containing albendazole or oxychlorosinide are effective from about 3 months after the sheep were infected and can therefore be used when treatment is recommended to remove adult flukes only. Outwintered beef cattle grazing potentially infected pastures, especially in high-risk areas, may need dosing with a flukicide with activity against adult fluke. Cattle with chronic liver fluke infection typically show signs of chronic weight loss and diarrhea. Cattle can be screened for fluke by checking for the presence of fluke egg in feces using bulk fecal samples from 10 animals. Throughout the country, more than 25% of bovine livers are condemned at slaughter because of liver fluke damage. If slaughterhouse results are positive, seek advice regarding treatment and control measures that need to be implemented. Moving on to lice, and firstly, lice in sheep. Both chewing and sucking lice can be found on sheep. Infestations of chewing lice are widespread in most sheep flocks and cause fleece loss due to biting and scratching. Sucking lice, which can cause anemia, are not a major problem in the UK. Like scab mites, louse populations are highest during late winter, with spread occurring by close contact with other sheep. Louse burdens are most severe in lean or emaciated sheep, are highly visible, being 2 to 3 millimeters in size, with their presence often highlighting poor stock management. Louse infestations are controlled with topical applications of high-cis cypermethrin or deltamethrin or by plunge dipping in diazono. Low burdens of lice are very common in the coats of cattle during the winter months and should not necessarily be considered of significance. However, populations can increase rapidly, causing intense itching or anemia if sucking lice are present. Both chewing and sucking lice are found on cattle in the UK. Where heavy louse infestations occur, these may be a sign of other underlying conditions and an indicator of ill thrift. A range of pour-on or spot-on synthetic pyrethroid products containing either alpha-cypermethrin, deltamethrin or permethrin and macrocyclic lactones by injection or pour-on are commonly used. Injectable macrocyclic lactones are effective against sucking lice, but may have only limited activity against chewing lice.